Today I'm going to show you the easiest fix for one of the Jeep Wrangler 392's biggest weak links. So what's the common weak link that can easily be fixed? It's these guys. Your factory CV axle shafts. Now all 392s come with CV style axle shaft. This is because it has a 4 auto default feature for the 3022 transfer case. Now despite the fact that the 392 does not have a front axle disconnect motor and just has a FAD plate, it still comes with a 2-piece axle shaft on the passenger side. This collar to engage them just is engaged all the time. Now this is a common weak link, and an easy upgrade for that is going with a 1-piece shaft. However, it's not that simple to just get rid of the CV and go to Ujoint, and this is why. Okay, so why does Jeep pair their most powerful Wrangler application with one of the well-known weak links on any four-wheel drive, a CV front axle shaft? Well, that's because they use a 3022 transfer case, and when you have that 4 auto feature, you're going to be sending power to the front wheels. And that's not that big of a deal with a U-joint if you're going in a straight line. However, when you start to turn, as you turn, you're going to need to make sure that you're spinning at the same speed, or you're going to get what's known as crow hop. A traditional U-joint, while I feel like they're superior in strength to this, they don't do very well if you have power going to them on the street. What ends up happening is the U-joint, as it changes angle, actually changes speed. That's why it's not called a constant velocity joint like this. The problem with that is it's very violent on the steering. It'll give you a lot of pushback. Off-road, it can be a real issue if you're trying to get over or out of an obstacle and you've got the wheel all the way turned, because not only are you going to get this crow hop from this uneven speed of the U-joint setup, but as the angle of the U-joint increases, the strength decreases in the joint. So that's a big deal. It's one of the reasons why you'll see failure videos of guys, they've got their wheel cranked all the way over, they're giving it a lot of power, they start to get this hop out of the front end, the U-joint lets loose, takes out the ball joint, takes out the knuckle, takes out the casting for the unit bearing. It's a big deal. It's a common problem, and that's why you typically see it. So the CV it's the only way you can make a 4 auto system for the 392 work on the street and you not have everybody going back to the dealer saying, hey, I've got a real problem in my front end. So from that, it makes complete sense. From an off-roading perspective, the challenge with CVs have always been 2 things. Number 1, I don't know why, but it seems like from the factory, they cannot build these things durable internally. I don't know if it's just a weaker casting or that they simply build everything so tight that the tolerances inside are fantastic for the road, where you don't hear any clicking or anything like that from the balls that are rotating inside. But as soon as you get the smallest amount of shock load off-road with a bigger tire, these things just come apart. The other challenge is the boot. They typically will tear fairly easily. I don't know why they can't make these things more durable. And as soon as you tear a boot, you're going to put debris inside of the joint and water, and you can have one trail ride and this whole axle shaft assembly is basically toast. So if a U-joint axle shaft isn't the right solution and the stock CV isn't durable enough for the trail, what's the correct solution? Well, there's only one, but it's a good one. This is the RCV Performance Ultimate CV 1-piece axle shaft upgrade. It's designed specifically for the JL Wrangler and Jeep Gladiator applications. Made in Rockford, Illinois by a company that's been around for over 75 years, this is a constant velocity joint that gives you all of the advantages of a stock CV, but has been engineered to be twice the axle strength of the factory shaft. Yes, they have data to back that claim up. Inside of the bell are 6 points of contact that retain 100% of the axle shaft strength up to 45 degrees. The JL RCV is actually 18% larger than a traditional RCV Dana 44 and has a lifetime warranty up to a 43-inch tall tire. RCV offers a 1-piece and 2-piece axle shaft upgrade for the passenger side. Since the 392 doesn't utilize a FAD motor, I went with the 1-piece shaft option. As of recording this, they retail for just under $1,450 with free shipping. A wildly cheap investment considering the strength and ease of installation. Speaking of installation, it's actually fairly easy and can be done in your own garage. If you are comfortable and capable of changing brake pads, you can absolutely do this install yourself. The first thing you'll need to do is assemble the shaft to the RCV bell. You need to press it down far enough for the snap ring to engage. Note that RCVs come shipped with grease and do not require any additional grease at the time of installation. To remove the old shafts, I placed my front axle on a set of jack stands and then used a T30 to unbolt the rotor. Next, I used a 35mm impact socket to remove the axle shaft retaining nut. After that, I moved on to the brake caliper bracket bolts, which use a 21mm. I pulled those out of the way and used a small bungee cord to hold them up. Your next step is to unbolt the dust shield and remove the Allen head bolt that secures the wheel speed sensor in place. Using a 12.13mm, you can now remove the 3 unit bearing bolts and discard them as RCV provides new hardware. At this point on the driver's side, you can simply pull the stock axle shaft assembly out. Removing the passenger side is similar, but in addition to the previous steps I have shown, you also need to pull the FAD plate from the axle. You'll need a 13mm to remove the 4 bolts holding it in place. To remove the 2-piece shaft, you will have to pull a snap ring, then you can slide the shafts out of the housing. It's worth noting that you will be reinstalling the FAD cover plate once the new axle shaft is installed. There is a seal built in, so you don't need to have any separate gasket material. The 2 biggest tips I can give you for installation are as follows. Number 1, add a touch of oil or just a little bit of grease to the end of the shaft going in the differential. This will prevent you from potentially damaging the inner axle seal. Next, the bright orange boot that RCV is known for can be a little bit of a bear as it's a very tight fit to get over the bell. I like to spray the inside of the bell boot with WD-40. Then, using a small pry bar and the bolts to essentially press it in place, I will pry a little bit at a time and get the boot where it needs to be. This is a little bit of a process, but this is how I like to do it. Once the boot is in place, you can now torque the new RCV provided unit bearing bolts to 75 pound-feet. At this point, you're essentially done with the installation. You will see a little grease escape from the boot after a few heat cycles. Just wipe it away and you are good to go. As of recording this, I've actually had these under my Wrangler for quite a few months, and on road I can tell you I haven't really noticed any difference over the stock CVs. I'm not hearing any additional road noise or any additional noise from the RCVs, no weird feedback in the steering. Everything feels the same as it did before. On the trail, it's been much of the same, as it's been a seamless transition. The big difference is that I now know I have a significantly stronger front axle set compared to what I did before. If you remember from my last 392 video, I was testing out a set of 38 by 1350 R17 Nitto trail grapplers. It's one of the reasons I decided to go ahead and upgrade to the RCVs, as when I was wheeling with those, I kept hearing clicking and popping that I'd never heard out of the front end before. I have since placed the 38s back on my Gladiator and moved to a 37 by 1250 R17 trail grappler. I feel this is a better balance of power and overall performance for the 392. Even with the 37-inch trails, which are one of the more aggressive and true to size mud terrains on the market, I am nowhere near the RCV strength threshold with this setup. If anything, my next upgrade should be a set of rear axle shafts, which RCV does offer for the JL Wrangler as well. Now, a quick word about servicing your RCVs. Now, as I showed you in the video, the RCVs already come greased. You do not need to add grease to these things out of the gate. Yes, they do send you their proprietary grease that they want you to use, and you want to use this as needed. Now, how often are you going to need to grease these things? It really depends on how often you're going to be using these things off-road and what kind of miles you're putting on them. Typically, I find every oil change, I'll add just a little bit. You don't want to overdo it because you're just going to be wasting grease. grease. So keep that in mind. They already come greased. Just use this thing around every oil change. You don't have to pull the whole shaft assembly out. You will likely have to pull off your tire and wheel if you don't have an easy way to get the balancing cap off. For something like my KMC wheel, all I have to do is take off the cover that bolts on with 3 bolts, and I can easily get to that needle grease fitting. At the end of the day, I think investment wise, the RCV is the absolute easiest, and really, if you're going to break down the nuts and bolts of it, cheapest way to build almost a bulletproof front end. I feel like eventually I'll probably need to upgrade the ball joints, maybe with some from Dynatrac. Since the 392 already comes with cast iron knuckles, I'm not really worried about those. So I've got a fairly strong front end, especially when I'm just running a 37-inch tall tire. Now, as you may have noticed, I am now back on 37s with a different wheel setup. I'll go more into that on the next video, talking about sort of the challenges and the stuff I figured out moving to this new beadlock setup. But for now, we're gonna wrap up this. If you've got any questions, just put them in the comments. If you wanna see what I'm working on behind the scenes, be sure to check me out on Instagram at Ali Mansour Editor. As always, I appreciate you guys watching and hope to see you on the trail. Take care. Thanks for sticking around to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing to the Driving Line channel. Our goal is to excite, entertain, and educate you on all things automotive. So if you want to come be part of our journey, please hit that subscribe button, and we hope to see you on the next video. Take care.